Keir Starmer has resigned as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, less than 2 years after Labour's 2024 election win. He stays in Downing Street until his party picks a successor. Here are today's developments. On Monday, June 22nd, Keir Starmer announced he is stepping down as leader of the governing Labour Party and as Prime Minister. He set out a timetable, with leadership nominations opening July 9th, and a new leader expected in place before Parliament returns in September. If completed, the handover would make the next leader the UK's 7th Prime Minister in roughly a decade. Reporting also notes, Starmer is the 6th UK Prime Minister to resign outside Downing Street in 7 years, a stretch of unusual turnover in British politics. Starmer won big in the 2024 general election, promising stability after years of churn under the Conservatives. Less than 2 years into that mandate, coverage says months of pressure from Labour MPs and cabinet ministers, worried about the party's electoral prospects, pushed him to step aside. His likely successor is Andy Burnham, a popular former cabinet minister and Greater Manchester mayor. A fellow Labour lawmaker resigned to open up a seat, and Burnham won a June 18th by-election in Makerfield, in suburban Manchester, to enter Parliament. Under Starmer's timetable, nominations open July 9th and are to be completed by the summer recess, ensuring a new leader before Parliament returns in September. Why it matters: a sitting head of government in a G7 country is leaving mid-term. Coverage ties his exit to falling Labour support in traditional working-class areas, poor May Council election results, and the rise of Nigel Farage's Reform UK, which leads several national polls and swept local elections across England in May. Here's how each side frames it. The Guardian's Polly Toynbee, a Labour-aligned columnist, described the move as an emergency removal of a leader she called very decent, but incredibly unpopular, arguing Burnham is best placed to take on Reform UK and working-class seats. On the other side, Reform UK and its leader Nigel Farage, as reported by Newsweek, framed Starmer's fall as proof that voters in post-industrial areas feel abandoned by both major parties, casting Reform as their voice after it swept local elections across England in May. After the first full day of talks in Switzerland, mediators say the United States and Iran agreed to a roadmap aimed at reaching a final deal within 60 days. The two sides set up a high-level committee to oversee the process, laying the groundwork for technical talks to begin immediately. Negotiators also agreed to create a deconfliction cell, including U.S., Iranian, and Lebanese delegations, but not Israel, intended to end the fighting in Lebanon between Israel and the Iran-backed group Hezbollah. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, called that cell the first real test of the negotiating process. Reporting cites an agreement to keep the Strait of Hormuz toll-free for at least 60 days. Technical talks are set to continue this week at a resort near Lucerne, with Qatar and Pakistan named among the mediators. One point to flag carefully: U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said Tehran agreed to admit nuclear monitors. Iran denied making any new commitments. That's a claim and a counterclaim, not a settled fact. Why it matters. The framework touches 3 flashpoints at once: Iran's nuclear program, the conflict in Lebanon, and shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Much of the sharpest criticism came from the right. Fox News, The Wall Street Journal, and The New York Post, all Murdoch-owned, questioned the deal's terms, and conservative commentators including Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, and Eric Erickson called it a weak agreement, with Erickson labeling it American surrender. Critics note it does not require immediate dismantlement of Iran's nuclear infrastructure or removal of enriched uranium. Framed the other way, NBC News reporting describes the memorandum as a de-escalation mechanism that lowers the near-term risk of direct military confrontation and opens a diplomatic channel. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said the framework benefits the U.S. by reopening the Strait of Hormuz and reducing hostilities. China's Commerce Ministry announced Monday that Chinese companies will be blocked from exporting dual-use items to 10 named American military-related firms, including drone makers and rare earth companies such as Red Cat Holdings, Oshkosh Defense, L3 Harris Maritime Services, MP Materials, and USA Rare Earth. Beijing framed it as retaliation after the U.S. Defense Department, earlier this month, added Chinese tech firms, reported to include Alibaba and Baidu, to a list of companies it says are linked to the Chinese military. Why it matters. It's a fresh escalation in U.S.-China trade and defense tensions, and it targets the rare earth supply chain that both militaries and tech manufacturers depend on. In Colombia's June 21st runoff, right-wing populist lawyer Abelardo de la Espriella leads the preliminary quick count with roughly 49.7%, to left-wing opponent Ivan Cepeda's 48.7%, a margin of fewer than 250,000 votes. That margin is among the narrowest in the country's recent history. In the first round, back on May 31st, de la Espriella led with about 43.7% to Cepeda's 40.9%, and with roughly 12.9 million votes. Reporting describes him as the most voted presidential candidate in Colombian history. Cepeda has acknowledged the preliminary count, but says the result is not final, and his party will challenge results from some 33,000 polling stations. An official manual count is expected over the coming days. De la Espriella, a business owner and lawyer who had U.S. President Donald Trump's endorsement, has never previously held elected office. Why it matters. A rightward shift in Colombia would reshape policy on security, the economy, and the country's peace process. And the margin is narrow enough that the official count still matters. De la Espriella's camp is treating the quick count as a victory and a mandate for a tougher line on security. Cepeda's camp calls the result unsettled and is formally contesting tens of thousands of polling stations pending the manual count. 3 people aged 80 to 95 died over the weekend in France's Bordeaux region amid an extreme heat episode, and nearly 2,700 schools were set to close or alter schedules. Bordeaux temperatures were forecast above 42 degrees Celsius, about 108 Fahrenheit. Weather agency Météo France placed 49 regional administrative areas under a red heatwave warning, and reporting says about 53 million people in France were under extreme heat alerts. The heat also extends to Spain, Portugal, the UK, Italy, and beyond, with some areas in the low to mid-40s Celsius. Why it matters. Reporting describes this as among Europe's most intense heat waves on record, and prior episodes have seen casualty figures rise as the heat persists across multiple countries. Those are the day's developments. We'll keep tracking the UK leadership timetable, the US-Iran technical talks, Colombia's official count, and the European heat. More tomorrow.